It is so hard for me to believe, but this year is winding up. 2024 is almost over. And I wanted to send out a reminder that if you have not yet taken advantage of the free coaching calls that I have going, make sure to do that. You head over to unashamedlyu.com, select the coaching tab, and you'll schedule that first session. It is completely free. These coaching sessions are for anyone that is either wanting to start something, even if you're not sure exactly what it looks like, or if you have started something, but you're feeling stuck and you need help restarting those ideas and dreaming big again. I want to help you make this year count. Let's make sure that you end this year living in faith over fear. Hello, and welcome to the Unashamedly You podcast, a space to enlighten, encourage, and empower you to go out and unashamedly be who God is calling you to be. I am your host, Jamie Herndon. I pray you hear less of me and more of Him as you listen to today's episode. Let's grow together. The guest that I have on today is a truly special lady. I actually met her through the Academic Educators Association that we host here at FPC NLR through our school, Calvary Academy. She and her husband help run their Christian school in Florida. They're heavily involved in supporting the AEA here. And I look up to her in many ways, but one of which is through knowing her children. And as a mom that is in the middle of raising young ones, when you see another mom who's raised her children well, you realize there's just so much that you can learn from her. So I am excited to hear from her today and gain some of her wisdom. Brandy Currie, we are honored to have you on the Unashamedly You podcast today. And if you wouldn't mind, just take a moment and share a little bit about yourself with us.
Well, I'm excited and honored to be here with you, Sister Jamie. We're just getting to know each other, but I can tell just from our encounter and meeting, even back at Mid America when we were there for AEA, just we're kindred spirits. I don't know if you believe in all that craziness, but I just feel like there's some people that you meet that you just, just immediately kind of click with, and you're like, ooh, I like that. I like that, what I feel right there. And I definitely felt that. And we definitely are loving the relationships that we are getting to build there in North Little Rock and through what God has opened with all of this stuff that's just woo that God is doing with the education and apostolic education. And we're excited to be right in the middle of it. We are from a little tiny town called Bellevue, Florida. It's so small. If you blink, we don't even have a Starbucks in Bellevue. So, the struggle is real. We have a Dunkin', woo, but not even a Starbucks. And I'm just tired of car washes and banks. That's about all we have here. But what we do have here and what we do have going on is one amazing church. So we attend Souls Harbor First Pentecostal Church, and it is right here in the middle of that town and just been here for, I guess, almost 28 years now. And our pastor is Pastor Jason Varnum and Sister Helena Varnum. They are the best, and we just have the best of the best when it comes to leadership. I'm so thankful for them. I am married to the most gorgeous man in the world. We are celebrating 28 years in December. Yay, us, right? His name is Donald Currie. He's the executive pastor here at Souls Harbor. And I have 3+1 children. So I have Noah. He is 25 and he is married to Sister Carrie, and God just blessed us. She's the most amazing daughter-in-law. And so thankful for that. And that's something different. That's in the last 4 years that, the family has grown like that. And then I have Luke as our middle one. He's 22. And then Livy is the baby. But I can't really say baby much anymore. She's a senior in high school. She's 17. She'll be 18 in March. And I feel like you blink your eyes and like they're grown, they're grown up. 18's never been a special number for us. Like we never said, when you get to this, but they're definitely there at adulthood and just working for the Lord on their own. And that's amazing. And we can get into that, but that's just a little bit of an introduction.
I definitely felt that kindred spirit myself. You guys are going to love her as well, I know, through everything that she shares today on the podcast. So, yeah, let's get started. Today we know you as Sister Curry. I was going to say, as I going to go, your daughter in law's name is Carrie Curry.
Yes.
Uh,
Bless her heart.
but today we know you as Sister Curry. But would you mind sharing a little bit of your testimony, how that you came to God, and share a little bit about how that you met your husband?
Absolutely. I love sharing my testimony. We're made overcomers through our testimony, and I am a huge advocate of sharing that with others. And also, doesn't it just do something to your heart when you remember where God brought you from? And I was not blessed to grow up in this, but the Lord, when I was a senior in high school, is really when things started moving for me and for my family. And so that's way back. I'm going to date myself in 1991. That blows my mind to think that I was a senior in high school. I feel like I should just have a cane, like, but I have just pledged I'm not going to get old. And so, anyway, in 1991, I was a senior in high school. My dad was a dirt farmer. Really, he was just. My mom had said, "I don't care who I marry, but I do not want to marry a dirt farmer." And guess what? She married a dirt farmer. So my dad grew watermelons and cantaloupes my whole life. That's what he was. That's what he did. And so, with something like that, we had highs and we had lows. So if he had a good crop year, things were really up. And if we didn't have a good crop year, things were really down. And for a marriage, especially a marriage that doesn't have the presence of the Lord in it, those highs and lows wear on a marriage. And so my parents fought all the time. I can remember times when my mom would say, "That's it." When I was very young, me and my sister, before my brother came along, and she would say, "I can't do it anymore." She used to have an old Thunderbird. And I remember one day she just threw us in the back of that Thunderbird. She said, I can't do this anymore. You can imagine as, two little girls in the back seat, what in the world's going on? And her family was in Jacksonville, which is about a 2-hour drive from where we are right now. And she just got in, and I can remember her just crying and just, looking forward and like, "I can't do this anymore." And we're in the back seat. What's going on? And she got about as far as Gainesville, and she flipped the car back around and said, I can't do it. I got to try again. So it's like that all the time. It was just, there were times when they just couldn't anymore. And then there were good times. But my senior year of high school, my mom had said, "I've just had enough." And she had come to me and my sister. And at this point, we had our younger brother too, and said, "I can't do this anymore." But she knew I had been with the same group of students my entire life. And she wanted me to graduate with that group. And she said, "I'll stay here." This was probably like in March. She said, "I'll stay here until May, until you graduate. And then I'm leaving. That this time it's for real. We just can't do this anymore." So there's a lot going on, which is amazing how God orchestrates in his great way, things you don't see that are happening in the background until it's over, and it's done and you look back and you're like, "Oh." And so that was kind of the thing that was going on. I was in a really bad relationship. I'd been dating a guy that I should not have been dating for a couple of years. And he was Baptist, and his parents, if we were going to continue to date, really wanted me to get baptized. They let me know I didn't need to be baptized to go to heaven, but because I was dating their son, they really wanted me to be baptized, which that's a whole nother Bible study, a whole nother thing, like why that would be the case, right? So I remember going to my parents and say individually, because we lived in a 2-story house and they had just really divided the house at this point and said, "I'm staying on my side until May, you stay on your side until May." And so we were like toting tails back and forth, if they needed one to know something. Horrible situation, right, for kids to live in. And so anyway, I went to my mom at one point and say, "Hey, his parents are asking that I get baptized. I'm going to do that this Sunday. Do you have a problem with it?" My mom was like, "No, I think that's great. Go ahead. I'm not going to come, but you get baptized." I went to my dad and I said, "Dad, I'm going to get baptized on Sunday. His parents wants me to get baptized." And my dad, he was livid. He went crazy. He was just like, that's insane. I can't believe you're doing that. That's not truth. Of course, I had no idea what he was talking about. I wasn't raised in church. He's just like, and I was like, "What in the world do you think if I'm getting baptized? That sounds like a good thing. I'm not out doing all these other crazy things, that I could be doing." But he just had it. Well, come to find out, he was raised in truth. Of course, I didn't know that. And at 16, he backslid. He very decidedly backslid. Like he had had a couple things that had happened to him in his life, let him get bitter. And at 16, he said, I'm not going to do this anymore. I don't want this for me. So much so, he had been the church kid and he went in the bathroom and he practiced saying swear words in the mirror so he could be cool like his unsafe friends when he went to school. Like that's how conscious of a decision he had made at 16. And so he did not live for the Lord anymore. But when I went and started talking to him about baptism, that triggered something in him and in his heart, you know. In the meantime, my grandmother, my Nana, who we did not have a very strong relationship with at this point, she is, working on building a church. They had a new pastor, they wanted a new building. And so they were doing these dinners every week. Sorry, I'm trying to make it fast, but it's just kind of cool how everything kind of comes together. But so they're cooking these dinners. Well, because my dad wasn't really talking to my mom, he had kind of mended his relationship with his mother. So he'd go down occasionally and go talk to her. And when he was down there, the new pastor of this church would just talk to him, and he'd sit there and talk to him. So God was working on him in multiple ways. And then on Easter morning in 1991, my mom got up in her side of the house and started getting ready. My dad got up in his side of the house and started getting ready. And they ended up meeting in the hallway. And my dad grumbled at her and said, where do you think you're going? Like they hadn't been talking. And she said, well, your mom called and invited me to Easter service, and I felt like we should go. And he said, well, she called and asked me to go. And he said, well, they don't know we're getting a divorce. Let's make it look good. Let's ride together. And at the time, that little apostolic church, they were just having service in a little double wide trailer of all places, Sister Jamie, until they could get their building built. And they went into that service and both of them felt something. My dad felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, and my mom had never felt it. And they just fell in love with it. And our lives began to change that day. And they stayed together. My mom passed in 2020, way too young, I personally think, at 67, but they were married, I think, 47 years at that point. So they would have already passed the 50-year mark if she was still living. But within the year, my mom, my dad, myself, my brother, my sister, and even my grandma that lived with us, we were all baptized in Jesus' name, all filled with the gift of the Holy Ghost. God just did an amazing work. And you don't see that a lot where a whole family at one time comes in like that to the truth. But man, God just did it in his perfect way. And you had asked about tagging on how I met my husband. So my husband and I had gone to the same high school. We didn't really run in the same circles. He was a grade below me. But his grandma and my great aunt, who had always been in church, and his grandma, who had always been in church, were best friends. And so they would call and talk to each other on the phone every day. So when my family got back in church, which my great aunt had been praying for a long time, praying for my dad, she started talking to her best friend, Mila Powell, and saying, Mila, you got to send some young people down here. Now we have young people in our church. Send some young people to help this church out and get these young people, fellowshipping. And so Mila Powell, Donnie's grandma, just kept on him. You got to get a group of young people down there. You got to get a group of young people down there. And finally he said, fine, Nana, I'll get a group of young people and we'll go visit. And so he did, and they visited as a group once or twice. And then all of a sudden I realized he came to visit all on his own one time. And I realized, oh, he's interested. And the rest is history. So
I love that story. And I think about Brother Booker's message where he preaches about God's love is in the details with your parents' story. And also, if you're listening to this and you have a wayward son or daughter, I can't imagine how much hope that gives. Like your grandmother never gave up. I'm sure she always prayed for him, and God moved and he did it and he answered her prayers. So that's such a special story. I love hearing that.
yes.
Well, we talked about that you and your husband are incredible parents and you have raised wonderful children that are in truth. They love the Lord. They're working for God. What is something that you would give to us that you believe is one of the most important things when raising children in today's world? Especially you weren't raised in the truth. So raising your children in the truth was not something that you had been taught, but something that you did.
So raising kids is not easy. It is not for the faint of heart, right? So I know that you realize that, but it is so exciting and it is so rewarding. And so there's just a few things like when I think about, being a parent and some things that have kind of grounded myself and my husband. So, there's a scripture in Proverbs 19:18. It says, chasten thy son while there is hope, and let not thy soul spare for his crying. And so, we have to parent while there's still hope and start from the beginning. I think for Brother Donnie and myself, our whole thing was we wanted to keep in mind that big picture. And that big picture was eternity. We had to look at our children and we just decided to look at our children as souls, like they needed to be one. And so when you think about that and you treat your children as individual souls that have to be one, just like the waitress at the restaurant or just like the cashier at Walmart, we got to win our children and we have to keep that, big picture in mind. You got to have a purpose and a plan. And I think that was kind of the biggest thing for us. Like there are definitely some things that, my parents had ups and downs, but they were good parents and they were for the most part moral parents, but just some of even their parenting that I could glean from. But overall, we knew we got to do this different. Like this has to be a whole. We can take these pieces, but we're going to have to do something very different. And so, we knew just like Moses' mom, she had a purpose and a plan. She had to get really creative and she had to know exactly what she needed to do. She came up with a plan very quick to keep that child alive. And so I think that you got to kind of keep that. Now, I am not I'm probably not your traditional mom. So when people ask me about, or just being transparent, when people ask me about speaking about being a parent or a good parent or a mom, I'm always like, because like I just feel like I'm so not typical. I'm kind of crazy. I'm kind of out there. But I do feel like my husband has helped tremendously. God bless his heart. He's an amazing man of God and he has just helped to bring balance. So I think we've done a pretty good job of helping balance each other out, knowing that we had a purpose for these kids, we had a plan for them, and really that purpose and that plan was for them to be saved, for them to spend eternity with us in heaven. And we've tried very hard not to look at them as just our friends. And I know a lot of parents can do that and fall into that. But it's probably hardest with Olivia because she's a girl and especially the age she's at right now. But she will look at me, bless her heart. She's so sweet. And most of the time, she's so sweet. she is a 17-year-old girl. So, but she'll look at me when we're having a good time together and she'll say, Mom, you're my best friend. And I have to remind her. And I was like, I love that, but I'm your parent. I'm first your parent. But someday we're going to be able to say we're best friends, but still we got some finishing touches we still have to do. I know that sounds horrible to some people too, like, oh, you crush her. And she appreciates that. She loves that. But I've never wanted to just be their friend. I want to be their guide. I want to help them make it to eternity. And that takes a lot of prayer. That takes a lot of nights for me staying up crying in my bed, wondering, God, did I miss the mark today? Did I do everything right? So lots of prayer and a lot of spiritual discernment that the Lord would just help us to, stay on that plan, keep guiding us, God, on that plan. But it is amazing it blows my mind when I see my children, ministering today and what God has done in spite of my imperfections as a parent. It's so good to know, that the Lord has done it in spite of me.
One thing I think as moms, we have to remind ourselves that God does make up the difference. So sometimes in spite of what we do, but you're obviously doing a very good job. You're doing something right because these children are being raised right. But something I don't think I've ever heard that statement before is to look at your children as souls.
Yeah.
Like that's really eye-opening. And that's one thing that I love about these podcasts and gleaning from others is because that is something that I definitely can glean from is they are souls. They're not just your children that are they're not automatically going to make it. And I think as parents raising our children in church and in truth, you just kind of can expect that they're going to make it to heaven. I'm bringing them here. I'm doing the right thing. They're in the right school. They're in the right environment. They got
Yeah.
everything they need to make it. But that's not exactly true. We see that every day. Young people are backslidden.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that they've got an automatic ticket to heaven just because we're raising them in the right place. They're still souls. And we're
Exactly right.
still their parents and we're still their God. And we have to treat them that way.
Yeah. But God in his ultimate wisdom, and we have to hold on to that as parents. So yes, they are souls, but God gave those souls specifically to me and Donnie, right? So there's a reason for that. Like God, and sometimes you just have to, you got to trust in God, but you have to trust in that. And I'm okay, we're just being real transparent now, but I have a confidence problem that sometimes, and I had to deal with that. And I've had to learn, even still sometimes I have to remind myself there's a reason God gave them to me. There's a reason, there's something that I can do for them. And that's been probably one of my biggest challenges as a parent is that lack of confidence and realizing I'm leaning heavily on the arms of the Lord, right? So, the scripture says what started in the spirit, let it so be completed in the spirit, and I'm paraphrasing that, but we have to be very careful that we realize that this is a spiritual journey and that they are souls. And so, from the very beginning, it's all in the spirit. And that's hard because of this right here, because I'm flesh, and I'm reminded daily, I have to practice. One of my daily prayers is, Lord, more spirit, less flesh, because the things that we're doing in the kingdom, that's all about the spirit. So it's hard for me. I know it's probably not hard for everybody else, but it's pretty hard for me sometimes. So I have to stay prayed through.
Like Bishop Holmes says, take your flesh by the nape of the neck.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
something we all have to do. I remind myself if Bishop Holmes has to do that, then I definitely have to do
For
that.
real. For real. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, talking about that your children are in truth and love the Lord, what are some practical ways that you would say would be good to instill a love for God in children?
So we were talking about my parents earlier, and although we weren't raised in truth, I wasn't raised, my siblings weren't raised in truth. We still had parents that had some really good practical things that they instilled in us and the way that they did it. One of the things is, and I'll come back to some other things and try to tie it all in, but one of the things that my mom was amazing at was making everything fun. Like, she was just the best at being fun. And so much so that when she did pass, I had people texting me, they were on my, sending me messages and saying, You don't understand. I can remember some of the best times I ever had was at Patty's house, because she was just a fun person. She was also huge on keeping us busy. Like, she felt like if she could keep us busy in good things, that we didn't have time to get into the bad things. And so, and my dad, he was, way more like practical. So he was the guy, two wrongs never make a right. But he was also like average is expected. And so that's just a norm. And I expect you to go above that and to be above average. So I have been able to utilize some things like that from them. And I suggest to anyone, when you're looking for practical ways to rate, just how can I implement these things to help my kids turn out to be God-fearing, uh, people and be, have a want and a desire to continue their walk with God and to be in the ministry. And so we started just looking for examples. There were things I could glean from my parents, but obviously I wasn't raised in church. So I looked at at the time it was our pastor, it's our bishop now, and his wife, Sister Varnum, and they're amazing. They're three children, Pastor Jason, Sister Danae Richardson, Lacey May, uh, Audrey, they are all phenomenal and they've always been phenomenal. Like, when I looked at them, I was like, that's it. Like, I want my kids to be like that. So immediately I started, trying to glean things, watch what they did, what types of things do they instill in theirs? How do they act about it? So there are a few things that we kind of learned from all of these things and kind of putting together and working at a school. I mean, man, talk about having a full palette, to look at and display and say, I love that. I love that their children take discipline well and can get over it well. How do they do that? And then we'd watch those parents, and even some not tos, right? Like some examples of what not to do. So we've been able to glean that. But just some practical things. We have fun when we work for the Lord. There was never an option when I started having children. Donnie and I were in the thick of ministry, both him working for the church and then, of course, taking over and working at a school. But there was no option for me to quit that. Like I never thought, okay, now that I'm a mom, I have to stop this right now and go be a mom, and then I'll pick back up on my ministry later. That was never an option. I never even thought about that. So I just, put kids in tow, and we did the work of God. And so they got to see that firsthand. But in doing the work of God with us, we tried to make it as exciting and fun as we could. So if we had to work all night at the school, because that's what you do sometimes, we're still putting up, bulletin boards, and we're still printing out, reports to get on the teacher's desk for the next day. I mean, we're at crunch time. They've got to come with us. So we'd make forts. We'd build forts and bring their tents and put them up in our office and say, you guys are going to have a camping night tonight, and, get the hot dogs out and do whatever, and make it fun for them. We are very careful not to ever run down ministry or the work of God in front of them. Like, can you believe we have to be here? We're here all night long. Don't they realize we have children? It was never like this. This is an opportunity. This is a privilege. Look at what we get to do for the Lord. We topped those things up. We made sure it was fun. My kids they absolutely love being around the ministry because we made them feel like those in ministry were superheroes. Bishop and Sister Varnum, our pastor and Sister Helena, they're superheroes. Like, can you believe how incredible they are? Look at what they're doing for God. Someday you guys are going to do a work just like that. You're going to work for the Lord, and you're going to get to do things just like that. And just, and they just hunger and crave that now. They've just grown up thinking these are Bishop Holmes, when we point, look at Bishop Holmes. When he came and preached for us, my kids were in hog heaven. They were like, he's amazing, and they just, have fallen in love with the ministry. And I'd like to believe that that's because we always just pushed how amazing ministry is, what an opportunity it was, and it's fun. And we kept them busy. We have a couple of mottos in our home. One of them is love God, hate sin. It sounds so simplistic, but we have always said that to our kids since they were teeny tiny. You're going to grow up, you're going to love God, you're going to hate sin. I mean, it sounds simple, but if you really start unpacking that, and we never made God the bad guy. We never made ministry the bad guy. We never made pastor the bad guy. If we're fasting because the church is on a fast, we tried not to say, well, the reason you're not eating is because of pastor. And we gave the reason. We're fasting because we're going to grow closer to God. We're going to be less carnal, less flesh, more spirit. And we try not to blame things. The reason you can't do these things, well, that's because pastor says so. That was never, a thing that happened in our home. But we also had another, we talked about the goodness of God. Look what God's doing. We made them a part of things. I can remember one time our engine blew up, and we were like, at the time, we didn't really have the money to replace that, whatever it was, $7,000. I can't even remember how much, but it was crazy. We couldn't go buy a new car either. And so we're like, you know what? God's going to supply, and we're going to use this as a lesson. So we made a chart that we printed out, and it was I forget how much money increments we put it in like this, and said, when we get this, we're getting that new engine, and we're driving this jalopy until we get the engine back in our good car, or whatever. And the kids were a part of that. So like they would come in, and I remember them looking at that chart, and we're like, look what God did. Do you see? He filled up 3 things. We had where a family came in, and they said that they just felt impressed to bless us. They had done something for us way back. We paid for that service, but they had not wanted to charge us. But at the time, they couldn't do without it. Well, now their business is being blessed, and God kept speaking to this man's heart about giving us, it was like a couple $1,000s. And he just walked up and said, I don't know what you need this for, and I don't know about the timing, but a few years ago, I wanted to do this for y'all, and I couldn't. And for some reason, the last couple of weeks, God has just put this strong on my heart. And we got to share that with our children because they came in one day and they're like, how did 2,000, that many blocks are off? You got to highlight them. And we're like, look what God did. So we just tried to make that apart. So love God, hate sin. That was a huge motto for us. Like, this is what you're going to do. But we also had the motto, and people always laugh about this one, and it stings a little bit to some people, but I'm going to throw it out there because we just always used it for our family. And it was, you're going to work for God or you're going to go to hell. And I know that sounds very strong, but the point was, if you will stay busy in the work of the kingdom, even at 5, 7, 9, 13, stay busy in the work of God. And I mean, my mom did it, but she did it for the wrong reasons. She had me in 4-H. She had me in cheerleading. She had me in speech. She had me in all of these things because she didn't want me doing the crazy things that some of my cousins were doing and other people were doing. But for us, we adapted that and said, we're going to be busy. Our hands are going to be busy in the work for God and for the kingdom. And you're going to see these amazing things that God's going to do for our family, for you specifically. And if you get lethargic in your walk with the Lord, that's when things can happen that aren't supposed to happen. So don't get lethargic in your walk with the Lord. You stay busy. You stay busy in the kingdom. And so those are just kind of two adages that we just always, lived by.
I'm a very straightforward parent myself. Some people laugh at me because I'm so serious about truth, about church, about God, all the things that you were just talking about, because it is serious.
Yes,
Like,
it is.
it is work for God or go to hell. Like, that
Yes.
really is the truth.
Yes.
But one thing that you said, love God, hate sin. There was a message that was preached at our church before, and it was that you love God, you love the pastor, you love the church, you love everything, but you don't hate sin.
Yeah.
And they're lost. And I know of personal family members. They love the church. They love everything about it. And they love truth, but they do not hate sin.
Yeah.
And
Both sides. Yeah.
you've got to hate it, and you've got to train your children to hate it,
That's exactly right. Yeah.
or they'll fall into it. So, you've got me so fired up. Everything's so good.
You go. Preach, Sister Jamie.
We are kindred spirits for sure. I
Yes,
will
we
put
are.
everything that you're saying.
Yes, we are.
But we all know that there are a lot of joys in parenting, and there are challenges as well. So tell us some of those biggest joys and then some of those biggest challenges that you've had as a parent.
So 3 John 1:4 says, I have no greater joy than to hear my children walk in truth. And so I think probably the most rewarding thing for me, I'm so blessed. Like, I cannot even tell you, Sister Jamie, what it does for me. And it's not just, all of my children are in ministry. And we've told them from the beginning, just like you said, you're going to work for God. You may not have a pulpit ministry, but you're going to do something for God. You're driving a van, picking up Sunday school people, children. You're going to be, cooking for dinners so that we can have group fellowships. You're gonna make flower arrangements because we're gonna need to decorate the great hall. For you guys. You guys are always doing something, and we need many hands make light work. Whatever you're gonna do, you're gonna find a way to use that for the Lord. You're going to be in ministry somehow. And again, it doesn't have to be pulpit ministry. But all of my children have, so Noah he is the youth minister. He's our youth pastor here, him and his wife, Carrie. Carrie is one of our worship leaders. I mean, her voice, I cannot even. And they all work the altars very well. Luke is an evangelist. He evangelizes and he's ministering. Livy, hers is going to probably look a little bit different, but the girl can preach already. I know she's been there in Little Rock, and you guys have got to see a little bit of her, here and there with some of the things she's done through the AEA. But just God opening doors, and that's what I want. I want God to determine, which way they go and what they do. But it doesn't have to be a ministry like that. Just like today, earlier this morning, I walked through our prayer room, and one of mine was hidden underneath a pew, just praying, as loud as he could up to the Lord. And so, those moments when they've got it. To me, that's the greatest joy when I can look, because I didn't have truth growing up. And so when the Bible says, buy the truth and sell it not, that scripture in front of that in Proverbs 23:22, hearken unto thy father that begot thee and despise not thy mother when she is old. Buy the truth and sell it not. And I pray that all the time over my children. I want them to desire that truth. I want them to hold on to it with clenched fingers, right? And I'm never going to let go of this. And knowing that I feel like and of course, I cover them in the blood all the time. I pray God would never let them step out of his truth and whatever. But just the fact that right now it seems that they all have that. That's my greatest joy, knowing. And we've had some cool opportunities where all of us at one time were helping with something in a service that we all were ministering in our own, and that was like kind of like mind blowing. Look what God's done. Look what he's done for little me and my husband, who both came from backslidden homes, and how he put us together. And now this next generation, just watching all my kids be a part. That's probably my greatest joy, knowing that my children, they have it. They have the truth. They love the Lord with all of their heart, and getting to hear them pray in the prayer room or in their rooms, at night when I can hear them. And walking through Libby's room the other day, I was going to pick up something out of her closet for her, and I saw these notes she had posted about, seeking the Lord first. Don't leave until you've sought the Lord this morning, those kind of things. Those are those moments, that you're just like, ooh, I could drink them in. I think you also said something about what are the challenges. And I mentioned earlier, for me, I feel like the biggest challenge that I've had to pray through is fear of failure. That has at times just almost crippled me as a parent, being so afraid that I would mess up what God has given me, because of my imperfections or my inabilities, and forgetting what God started in the spirit, he's going to complete in the spirit, and forgetting that he's got my back. He gave them to me for a reason. But, girlfriend, I can't tell you the times I have laid in my bed, you know, woke my poor husband up, and he'd just roll over and be like, what's wrong? And I'd be like, I'm just thinking about today and how I talked to Noah, and I don't know if I gave him the right advice, and he's just like, oh, feeling bad. Let's pray about it. And then he'll just roll right back over and go to bed. Sometimes I'd pray and cry on purpose because I wanted to get up and talk to me about it. If you've ever done that, that's horrible. Now I'm really being transparent. You just cry. That's a whole nother thing if we were talking about marriage. But yeah, I've done that before, where get a little bit louder. So he really hear me. Oh, babe, what's wrong? I'm like, aren't you worried about these children like I am? I feel like you should be worried. But that's probably been my biggest challenge, having to pray through myself, and my insecurities, and not put those on them. That's not their insecurities. I don't want to put my insecurities on my children, or, because they all, thank God, have way more confidence in the Lord than I have had, and I've gotten better. And I think some of that comes from, coming from a backslidden family. And I don't know. I don't know what it is, but the Lord has had to help me. And I have to quote those, God has not given me a spirit of fear, but a sound, help my mind, Lord, help my mind, guard my mind, Lord. That's probably, for me, that's been my biggest challenge.
So you're pretty much telling us that it never ends, because I think
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. I told, even now, like, Noah's married, and I'll catch myself. My husband's like, Brandy. And I'll be like, I can't help it. Do you think everything's okay, with them? And they're wonderful. They're great. But, it doesn't matter that they're married. I'm still worried about them, just like I'd worry about, just like I'd worry about him when he was in kindergarten. I can remember crying myself to sleep one night because he got, now I'm really telling myself, but he had gotten this, it's not even a report card. It was K-5, but it was like things they could work on. Right. And it was 2 letters that he was having trouble with. And I'm a teacher. So I was like, what, and I remember, like, in the bathtub, okay, what does letter whatever say? And everything was a game. But one night I put him to bed, and I was like, okay, I love you. I prayed over him. I was like, okay, and what does whatever letter T says, whatever. And he was just started crying. He's like, Mom, I can't take it anymore. Like, it was like I was just consuming him. And I was like, And I realized what I was doing, I didn't realize, and I remember going to bed that night and crying, and my husband like, "What is wrong with you?" So there are still moments, now that he's 25 that I'm, you think everything's okay and how are things going? But yeah, it doesn't get any easier. We have a young lady that works for us here at the school, and I remember when she had, I think it was her first one that she had, and we were, um, I don't even remember how old he was, but we were at the door doing dismissal together. She was so tired, and she was almost in tears, and she was like, "So tired. He doesn't sleep. His sleep schedule's not right." And honestly, I didn't mean to. I really didn't mean to, but I started laughing. Isn't that horrible, Sister Jamie? It is so horrible to me. But I literally started laughing. Of course, she's teary eyed. She's like, confessing how hard of this time she's having. And I just looked at her and I said, "It doesn't get easier." And she just stopped crying and her eyes got big. I said, it's wonderful. It's amazing. It's rewarding. But I'm telling you right now, what you're feeling, this is a physical tired. And that's something you can go get some sleep for and feel better. But as they get older, you're going to be emotionally tired and you're going to be spiritually tired. But you cannot give up. This is just training in one of those areas. And as they get older, you wait till they're preteen, and you just want to, it takes everything, I could just, I'm sure nobody feels that way, just me. But there have been times, I mean, I be angry, but sin not. I've never, ever beaten my children. I do believe in spanking. I guess that, I don't know, different people feel different way, but it's in the word, it's biblical. But I just have times where I'm like, are you kidding me? Because they're not perfect. They're flesh like I am and I'm flesh. But it definitely gets harder, So yes, I am telling you, Sister Jamie, it doesn't let up. It gets different. It does get different, but it doesn't stop. Sorry.
The different doesn't sound any better. It sounds worse.
No, it's not. It's actually so much more. It just is so much more rewarding. It's like the Lord knew, just like we forget how hard it was to push them out, and get them here, all that physical, and the Lord made it where you forget, or we wouldn't have more than one, right? We would be like, no way, but I'm silly. I had three. And so, it's like that, you have so many rewards that come that it's okay. But I don't think you ever stop caring and praying and interceding for them. That's never going to stop.
That's right. And like we've heard before, you've got one chance. Like you can't mess it up. You've got one chance at the fate to turn them out right. Like you do everything you can. You can't get tired. Like you were saying, you can't give up. You've got to keep going.
So how old is your oldest?
Ada will be 13 in February. So
Bless your heart, 13 and a girl. So I've dealt with that now too. But you wait when they start getting where oh, they could be leaving anytime. Then you really get in like crunch mode where you feel like you're like you're like trying to all that last minute perfecting and you're trying to shove all that you can in them because you're just not sure how much you'll get to put in them. That's fun too. So we can do another podcast in about 15 years. I'll let you know about that,
Let me know if you did it right that time for the crunch time.
Yeah.
One thing that's so important, though, that I feel like everything that you've talked about is really whenever you teach them to pray, to love God, to immerse yourself in the church. Yes, we're all natural. We're all human. There are things that our kids are going to do that you're like, what in the world? Like, why did you do this? How did you do this? But we do that ourselves. Like, I do things and I'm like, Jamie, you know better than to do that or to say that. Like, why did you do this? So that's all normal and natural. But when they know where to turn, like that is to me, that's the most important part, especially right now. Like I want my kids to know where to turn and how to have that relationship with God. And they cultivate that and they learn that now. You cannot start teaching your kids how to have a prayer life at 18 years old. I mean, you can, but they're not going to be far enough along. I mean, they're making life changing decisions at 16, 17, 18, 19 years old. That's not the time to learn to pray. That's the time to already know how to pray and to be turning to leaning to God during that time.
That's exactly right. And I think we have to be you got to be balanced, especially when it comes like everybody makes mistakes, like you're saying, like, Jamie, how did you do this? And I'm the same way. And I make a lot. I make a lot of mistakes. And so as a parent, as a wife, that's a whole nother discussion. Like, I'm definitely, if you see what a nut I am when it comes to parenting, I'm a bigger nut when it comes to marriage, but somehow God has held us together for almost 28 years. And so you have to have grace. God has grace for them. You have to have grace for them. And so you have to realize they're not perfect. And sometimes if we're not careful, we take that as like a personal, like, they messed up and they're a reflection of us. So now, oh my goodness, they're a reflection of us. And now they're making this mistake. And now, but it's their mistake and we have to help them through it. And so we've always been really big about you can't make them keep reliving things. Like, once they've gone to prayer about it, we know they've truly repented about a mistake, then it's done. It's under the blood and let them move on. I try very hard not to bring that back up. God doesn't do that to us. I'm not going to do that to them, like where I just keep bringing up that, well, remember you did this. So we're not going to, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do that anymore. So I try very hard to leave that under, and I'm very careful not to tell other people about their mistakes. I'm huge about finding mentors, asking people. I can remember the first time I sat in a group of women and they were talking about things that they were dealing with their children. And I remember thinking, oh my word, everybody is dealing with that. I thought I was the only one that felt that way or dealt with that. And so there was such like solace or such, I was relieved to know that. But I'm very careful about not sharing every little nitpicky thing about my children or about mistakes they've made because they don't deserve that. Like, I want them to be able to grow in their ministry and not have all that baggage out there. Does that make sense? So I feel like we really got to balance it. I think we have to be Sister Jamie and Sister Brandy and say, you're going to pray through. And there's a difference in praying and praying through. You can pray a lot, but you got to pray through what you're dealing with right now. Obviously, your attitude is not right. And so you need to go pray. And when I say you need to go pray, Olivia, when I say you need to go pray, Luke, Sil, when I say you need to go pray, Noah, you need to go pray through. Pray until you conquer that, whatever that is you're feeling. And so we can be that, but then we also have to know they're also human. They're going to make mistakes. That does not mean we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We pick ourselves up, we pray through it, we move on.
So good. Such good advice. And as parents and as moms, I'm speaking to myself and all of you that are listening as well. We have to know how to pray through.
Yes.
And so it's not just what you want your kids to do. I have heard parents saying, like, I wish they would pray, or I wish that they would get loose in church. I wish that they would do this, this, and this. And I'm sitting here thinking, but it starts with us. Like, when they see you, that's when they do. I remember that my dad growing up, he backslid whenever I was 13 years old. But I remember so vividly, my dad worshiped every service. He always worshiped. It was always a part of it. And I remember even as an adult thinking, you know what, devil, you think that you have him out in sin and that he's no longer here to worship you, but I am his seed and I'm going to worship double till he gets back. And I would do that. But he taught me how to worship. If my dad would have sat back the whole time and never worshiped and not been involved in the service and there were things that he did. I remember he used to always go to the side of the altar and he would hit the side of the altar and holler. And he would just like hit it and holler. And I remember sometimes in services, I would wish that my dad was back in church so bad. And I would go over to that side altar and I would hit and I would holler. And I would be like, you know what? Like, you think that you have him and you have him bound and that's gone, but it's not gone. I'm going to do that. But because he did that, and as parents, I think about that with my own children. I'm like, I don't want them to outdo me. I don't want them to have a bigger relationship with God and to trust God more and to go after things more in the service than what I'm doing. I don't want to expect more out of them than what I'm expecting from myself.
That's exactly right.
And as parents, that's important. I feel like for
crucial. Yeah, it's absolutely crucial. And I have always, tried to do that, and be like, I was a cheerleader before I came to the Lord, cheered for 6 years. So the Lord deliver me from that. But I remember when I was getting into church and the first time I went into an apostolic church, just thinking, whoa, these people are a little crazy, you know? But very quickly, God gave me a revelation and said, are you kidding me? You literally flipped around, you know, half clothed, to be honest, you know, running up and down a field, yelling for boys that didn't do carrying a pigskin, like when we just really, and you would do that, but you won't give your 100% all in worshiping me who died for your sins. And when he laid that on me, I just made up my mind then. Yeah, I don't care. I'm going to be radical. And so I've always been that way in worship. My husband is that way in worship. And for that reason, now are there days when you're tired and you've dealt with school things all day long and you feel defeated but what do? We go in because we want to be an example to our children and we do it. We have a couple in our church. Their names are brother and sister Ellis. And Sister Ellis is famous for when her children were younger, she would just get in the spirit and she would just be worshiping and she would go and grab her children, Tiffany and Donnie. She'd pick them up and she'd just run around the church with them. It was almost like they were flapping in the wind behind them. Like everybody would be like, whoa, there she goes. But I tell you what, both of them know how to worship. They're unashamed to worship. They worship with their whole heart. Actually, Pastor Donnie is one of our campus pastors now. And like, they're just fanatical when it comes to worship. And it's because they had parents that were not afraid to be just radical about how they worship God. And it's exactly right. I do the same thing when I teach. I'm not going to ask my students to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. I'm not going to ask my children to worship in a way that I'm not willing to worship. I'm going to ask them and push them. It'd be so, you know, when we teach, you know, you can say something, but your actions a lot of times speak louder than words. So you can tell your kids, pray, pray, pray. But if they're not seeing you pray, 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 it could fall on deaf ears. So we definitely have to lead by example. You preach, Sister Jamie.
That's so true. I'm pretty passionate, I guess you could say, about that and about that topic. But let's switch up a little bit and talk about something that I feel like is scary for all of us, and that is the challenges of technology and social media, all those things. So my children are too young right now to be on social media, but there is an age and a time that all those things come. And technology, I mean, Ada is in seventh grade and they do have to get on the computer to study certain things. I mean, it sure makes it easier. I know that whenever they could ask, get on the computer to be able to go over some things and Quizlet and all these things that are out there. But that's technology and it's just there. It's just a part of our lives now. And so what are some ways that you address technology and the social media and the scares that can come with it?
All right. So if I haven't really messed some people up already today, I'm going to mess them up a little bit more now. So I'm apologizing in advance, but don't trust children. Don't trust children. And some parents have a really hard time with that. I don't know why, because they feel like to build trust, you have to trust. And I get that and all, but my husband has always said, don't trust children. Or you can take it from this approach. This is what Bishop would always say. Trust but verify. Trust but verify. And so in this social media world that we live in today, technology is so scary. And I feel like it's my job to protect my children from that. And there are so many different things that you can do to do that. But again, I always and my kids have never had a problem with it because I'm just very candid with them. You know why I don't trust? Because I was your age. You have my DNA running through you, and I know what I did as a young person. And so obviously, as long as we have this as part of our daily walk, we have this flesh can get us in trouble. So we're going to help you by showing you how to do this the right way, but we're going to check everything. And so that's how we've always have been. I know some people would be like, oh my word, are you kidding? But we have set our systems up, our computers up, our phones up where I could read Noah's text. I can read my children's text. They not just go back and read like when his text came in. I could see what texts were coming in and I could read that. That was even through him and Carrie dating. So think about that. Now there came a point where we were like, once they were engaged, okay, I don't need to see all those texts, but definitely in the first parts of it, and he told her, and what a great girl. Like I knew she's the one then because he said, look, my parents see everything that's on my phone. And she was like, good, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. So, like mind blowing. So a couple things that I would say about technology, be careful, trust but verify. That's not hurting your kids, that's helping your kids. And technology for us has always been specifically phones. That's a way for our family to communicate, not you to communicate with your friends. That's an added bonus should we allow you to do that. But that I pay the bill, it's going to be for what I want you to use it for. And I'm happy to pay the bill so that I can continue to do that, that kind of thing. So we make the rules. We never allowed for internet gaming where people could play games and still talk to other people because all kinds of people could get in through that. We always turn in our phones. You're only on technology in open areas where everybody can see what you're on. There's never any, I'm in this back room or I'm in my bedroom with me and just my laptop. That doesn't happen. We're in open areas. You turn in your phone every night. Your phone gets plugged up in my room, charged in my room. And if you don't, you suffer the consequences for that. You might get that taken away. Also, all children are not the same. My children were not made the same. Now, we parent the same in that we, are going to put the truth in them. Where all these things we've been talking about today, we're going to put that in every single child. But when it comes to things like this, not all children are ready for responsibility at the same age. So there was never any, well, Noah got this when he was this old. Doesn't matter. What matters is, do I think Olivia's ready for this at this age? And so all of my children got their phones at a different time when I felt like they were mature enough to handle that. And we lock them down. We lock their phones down. Like I said, we read the text. We started with flip phones, because that's all you need is two people in your phone to call if you're stuck at youth service and you need a ride. That's all you're going to use that for for a little while. And then they kind of built up, in responsibility. So we never treated everybody like it wasn't just a given, when everybody was going to have that. Social media is evil. It really is. And it's one of those things that we all know it is, and we still partake in it and we deal with it. So for Noah, just for us, he was not allowed to have it until 3 months before he graduated. We let him make the decision if he wanted to get on social media. We were going on a senior trip. We were there with him. Obviously, we can read whatever he posts on social media. And he was already taking classes to be in public relations. So for him, it's kind of a big deal. He does a lot of our social media at the church. For the school, he does all of our social media. So it's kind of his job. So he's on it, but he and Carrie, they fast it quite a bit. They'll put it down, for a while. And they've been very good. But now Luke, he's not on social media. And so once he got to a certain age, we said, you can if you want, but he does not. And so far, Libby has no desire to be on it as well, just because they see, what it can do. And so I would say be very careful, for me, definitely, I did not want my kids on it until they were pretty close to being adults. And again, 18 is not a magic number. It doesn't make you an automatic. To me, in my eyes, you're not just this automatic adult. Different people kind of hit things at different times. But there is great software that's out there. We actually have friends, Chad Wicker and his wife, she works for a church. They are absolutely amazing when it comes to these things. He is like, he has like 8 phones. Like he's as tech can be, and he's safe. So for them, they have promoted and they do seminars in our church that are just so good and help you to know all these different ways you can safeguard. So like with Apple Screen Time with iPhone is the way to protect. Google Family Link with Android. And then there's also a software, it's called Accountable to You. And it's ways that you can lock and limit your child's phone, how much they're seeing, what they're able to access. Like I know their son, they had his phone on this. And so it like alerts them if any kind of wrong words are put in, different things like that are put in. Like, for instance, he was making a packing list because he was going on a youth trip. And one of the things that he typed in was he had to pack underwear. I know that's crazy, but as soon as that was typed in on his notes, like their phones were lighting up, like alerts like crazy. Now he knows it doesn't. So sometimes he'll just, for meanness, he'll put, a word like that. So it's like, and, or ask for experience something that, something stupid, not inappropriate that he can put in. But like, you can lock their phones down. So if it's just necessary that they have it, they can have it, because I can't imagine. I mean, my mom, I went all over the place without a phone. My mom let me drive. Like, how did we do that back then? How did I make it without Google Maps? Help me, Lord. I do not know. I'm horrible about directions. And my husband, bless his heart, I'll call and say, hey, how do I get to blah, blah, blah? And he'll say, okay, you're going to head east on 58th Ave. And and I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You know me better than that. Do I turn left or right at TJ Maxx? That's what I need to, when's my next term at Walmart? So I don't know how we did it before and how parents just let their children drive and go out. I have Life 360. I have all my children are low jack where I know exactly where they are at any given moment. So anyway, there's ways to do it safely. There are ways to do it safely, but it's not for everyone, and that's okay too. I hope I gave a little bit of it, but I'm telling you, there are people that know what they're doing, and so you can get with some of those people, and there's ways to get around it now.
It's our pastor always says, do not use the excuse of, I don't know how to work it. I don't know what's going on. Like, figure it out. Figure out what's going on. Go talk to someone that knows what's going on.
That's exactly right.
Thankfully, I have Matt, and he can figure out what's going on because I cannot figure out.
That's me and my husband, me too. I'm like, I don't want them on that. And he was like, okay. I was like, well, make that happen. I don't want them on that. He's like, okay. That's how I was like, I know they don't need this. So you're going to, and it's like, all right, but like my good friends too, that can say, okay, this is what you want to turn off. This is what you want to turn on. Here's the software you want to put on there. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. She has a phone to be able to call, us and different, but it's so locked down. There's no Safari. I had a parent and they were telling me, they're on Safari or they're on games, and I didn't say anything. I'm thinking Ada doesn't have Safari. She doesn't have games. Like, it's like, I can't look anything up or I can't see anything.
Yes.
Like,
they're not right. They're crying. Yes. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And she has to make all A's or she doesn't get her phone. So I'm telling you.
Come on, Sister Jamie. That's what I'm talking about.
That's how she got to get it. And I'm like, whenever you prove that you're responsible enough to make all A's, then you're responsible enough to have a phone. Otherwise, it'll go by age limit instead of just, it's a responsibility or at a certain age, which is driving. So she really started studying. And even her teachers, sometimes one of them texts me, like, Ada has been in here doing all kinds of makeup work and she's doing extra credit, all this stuff. She's like, she deserves this phone this quarter.
Yeah. They're all rooting for her. I love that. Absolutely.
And as my mama heart kind of feels sorry for her, but her daddy does not one bit. He's like, you don't make it, you don't get it. Too bad.
Isn't that the beauty, though, of a wonderful partnership like that you can help one another like that? Because there have been times that I've been like that, too, where I feel guilty that I was talking about, or that fear of not doing something right and want to give in. And Donnie and all his wonderful wisdom, which just makes him even cuter, just comes in and says, no, we're not doing that. We are not doing that. It's hard sometimes because you don't always agree about everything, even though it should be. For example, so when we started our campus ministries, that was a huge deal for us here at Souls Harbor, and we are crazy busy. And he's the executive pastor, so we're always doing something for the main campus here. So when we started our campuses, our other campuses, the first one was Dunellen, and I can remember one morning I was actually in the shower, and my husband came in because we were getting ready for church, and he said, babe, I feel like the Lord wants us to give the boys to Dunellen for a little while. And I was like, what are you talking about? Immediately. He said, I mean, like on Sunday mornings, I think, Noah's old enough to drive now. Actually, I think when they first started going, even though Noah could drive, he was just driving, so we didn't feel very confident in that. So we took a van every Sunday morning down to Dunellen. And he said, they can ride the van. And I remember looking at him. I'd love to say, like, yes, babe, if the Lord spoke to you, that's what we should do. And I was that compliant. But Sister Jamie, I'm not always that compliant, just being transparent. I got to pray through this me sometimes. And I remember looking back at him and saying, okay, I'll pray about that. My husband had spoken, no, that's what the Lord needed. And very quickly, I got out of the shower, thought about it for a while, and I said, if that's what you think and that's what you feel in the Holy Ghost, then I'm with you. That's what we'll do. Because I was thinking there's something about them being there where I can see them ministering, them sitting with me on the pew. I knew there were going to be Mother's Days, Easter services, that they were going to be there. I didn't know for how long. And we sent them, both boys, and now Livy goes, but the boys are back now. But for a couple years or more, they went. But the value that they have gained and knowing what it's like to push in a small church and where people depend on your worship to make a service go. And I mean, Luke's job the first year he was at Dunellen, this sounds really crazy. He was the pooper scooper. We had the campus that we had was in a main, like, little neighborhood, and people would walk their dog, and we had a grassy area, and they'd all walk their dogs there and just let them go. And every morning when Luke got off the van, that was his job. He had to go and get, whatever tools he needed to clean up before all the guests started arriving. And Noah was playing the guitar. Had just learned, but he was playing the guitar, and so it just pushed them. So just going back to working as a team, sometimes we have to just trust one another and that we know, what's best for our kids. And like, I can't express how much my children have grown from being involved with those campuses. And I would have missed it, or I might have missed it for them if I wouldn't have just trusted in what the Lord had spoken on me.
That's true. It's not always easy, especially as moms and our mama hearts talking about, we're a little more soft. But, not everyone has that support on both sides. Do you have any advice maybe for a parent or, a mom listening who feels alone or unsupported in raising children in a godly home?
So my heart does break, but you have God, and like we've been talking about this whole time, and God's always got your back. And I know that seems like the easy way out, like, sure, just say that, but prayer and God, but also find someone to help, connect with someone. The scripture is all about the elder helping those younger women that are coming up, those younger moms. Find someone that you can attach yourself to. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be afraid. Look around and look and say, I like how she does that. I like how she's raising her children, and connect with them so that you have someone to bounce things off of and ask them. Obviously, you're taking things to the Lord. Obviously, they're not going to be with you day and night, but ask, can we have coffee once a week? Can I call you or text you when I'm dealing with something, and just let me pick your brain. How would you handle this situation? And use those godly examples, and don't be afraid to, but when you do, you have to be ready to take that. You have to be willing to kind of grab on to some of that advice and say, okay, I think that could work. Let me pray about that. You can't just go and ask and then not be willing to, if you want those results, you got to be willing to take some of those things in. And you always need help. My friend Rita, I was talking about her earlier. We just had this huge outreach that we did at our church for fall. It was like a fall festival thing. And when she was in line at one of the things, there was a young person in front of her, and she started talking to them. And she had had a child very young. She was not married. And she was talking about the fact that they got into conversation, and Rita was saying, well, do you have help? And she was like, I have my mom, and she said, I don't know what's up with young people today. This was this young person saying this. She said, all of my friends, they want to go it alone. They think it's cool to try to just, and she said, I cannot imagine. She said, I need help. I don't know what I'm doing, and I need help. And so she had clinged on to her mom and her aunt, people that she looked up to that went, and I feel like if that young person can see that, we need to see our need for help. Even with Donnie as a partner, obviously we talk about most things, but I went to Sister Varnum. I go to Sister Helena Varnum, my pastor's wife, and say, I don't know. I don't know why he's acting like this. We're talking about one of my kids. I'm about to lose it on them, help me. What do I do, And one of the things I will say about this, is there a great balance? Like Sister Varnum, our bishop's wife, she is like, she helped me to feel like I didn't have to be perfect. Like, she just says it like it is, kinda like you were talking about with Bishop Holmes. She's not gonna cookie cut anything. She's just gonna make you feel real, but make you feel like you can do anything in the spirit and still be real like that. And Sister Holly, I mean, she is amazing. She is just the most even, tempered, just rooted in the word. If you're in the prayer room and you hear her praying, like, it just soothes you, like, you just know, and, just having both of those that I can glean from, when I'm literally just feel like I'm gonna lose my mind. Maybe I think I have all the answers, but I don't, and I'm just, like, butting my head up against the wall about a specific situation, and I've had times I remember, like, "I can't believe this is happening," and just gone crying, like, "Sister Barnum, help me before I hurt them, like, what am I gonna do?" And to just say, "Look, this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna make them pray through, but this is what you're gonna do to make the situation better?" And it's so invaluable having someone like that. So I would say grab a hold of someone to be that helpmeet, to be that person that can kinda help you.
I think realizing, like you said, you don't have to do this all by yourself. You're not alone. Even if you feel alone and you're alone because you don't have a spouse that's helping you, there are other people that can help you. So turning to those people, what a great reminder. I feel like that we can't talk to you without bringing up education because I know that that is such an important part and such an important thing to you and to your husband. What is a way that you have seen, a Christian education, a Christian curriculum directly impact your children and just the children that you teach, their worldview, their values by being in that Christian environment?
So so growing up, education was a big deal to my parents, and not because of the reason that you think. My mom was the kind of student that she would do the whole book report, and then when her teachers would ask her to get up and do the book report, she'd say, "I'll take a 0." Because she did not wanna get up in front of people. And so she didn't push herself in school. And she just made up her mind when she had kids, "I'm pushing them." So it was a very big deal for her. In our public school system, and I'm sure they do it still very similar, they may do it a little bit different, but they grouped us. You know what I'm talking about? So there was like an A group, a B group, and a C group, and you knew kinda who was in the A group and who taught the B group and C group. And I can remember, I'm not kidding, Sister Jamie, in kindergarten, m my mom knew who the A group was. She had been volunteering with my nieces and nephews because my aunt didn't wanna volunteer, so she didn't care, she liked having fun, so she'd go in as the class mom, even for my cousins. And so she knew who the A group was and who the A teacher was in kindergarten, and they had just placed us, we didn't test or anything into it, but they had just placed it, and I was put in the B group. It's probably not a big deal, but my mom wanted me to have every advantage that I could have, and she went down to that office and she said, "I know who the A group is, and I know what teacher. It's Miss Levine. She's the A teacher, and that's where I want her." And they're like, "Well, Miss Hurst, we can't do that." Whenever she said, "No, no, I will stand here until you've moved my daughter into the A group because this will set the tone for her entire academic career." And she was right, it did, and she did, and I might not have been as smart as those kids, but I learned to work to keep up with those kids. And so education was just a big deal, and they pushed me to go to college and get a college degree, and I knew I didn't care about going, I didn't wanna go, but I knew it was a big deal to them. So I just did it because I wanted to please them. A I'm a parent pleaser, a people pleaser, firstborn, you know how they are, and so I just did it to do it. And it was really same way for my husband. His parents really wanted him to go further than he did. But when we started considering taking the school, when we had kids, we knew there's only 2 options. We'll homeschool or they'll be in a Christian school. Even though public school is a whole different thing now than it was even when I was at public school. We just knew that that's not gonna be for our kids. We just knew that wasn't for the kids. But when the door opened that we could be a part of the school, like, I can remember, we like, I was teaching in public school. I taught for 2 years before, I pulled out and I became a part of Souls Harbor. So that was 25 years ago when I had Noah. And I had planned on going back to work at a public school after I had Noah until he could, when he was in school. And then I thought, well, I might need to make some adjustments once he's, 4 or 5. But God just dealt with me strongly about not going back. And I knew it was happening, but I was afraid to tell Donnie, and I knew we needed the money. And because he had taken a job at the school the year before Noah was born. And so I was like, I don't know what to tell him, because we were definitely not in it for the money at that point. The school was not that size. So, and I was like, what am I going to tell him? And I remember coming in one day and I was just crying. I was like, okay, I just have to tell you, I feel like the Lord's been talking to me and I'm not supposed to go back to work and I'm supposed to somehow be with Noah all the time and I don't know what to do. And so he was like, okay, let's sit down. Let's talk about it. And that was my open door. Like, I started going and just doing 1 or 2 classes for Souls Harbor. But I had been at public school for those 2 years before. So anyway, when we decided and we both really came on board, both of us, and said, okay, this is our ministry and this is what we're doing. We just both knew that the best education had to be founded in God's word, obviously. And for me, homeschool would have been an option. I tried it for 9 weeks when Luke was little. I just had Libby and I wasn't ready to come back with Libby. So I said, let's try it. I've never tried homeschooling. And I was hiding in the bathroom and crying, Sister Jamie. I could not do it. I would go in the bathroom and hide. I was, nursing one child. I had one learning to write his name, and the other one was, I forget what grade Noah was in, 1st or 2nd grade. And I'm like trying to discipline them for things that they're doing, but I'm also trying to keep them up on their work. And I would just find times to go to the bathroom and say, Mommy just has to go to the bathroom for a minute. I'll be right back, And I'd get in the bathroom and I'd be crying and I'd call Donnie like, I cannot do this. I am not cut out for homeschooling. But I taught all the time, but it just wasn't my jam, And I'm all for those that homeschool. I definitely think that it has so many pros. But for us, God had put it in front of us for the school and to be a part of the school. And honestly, it's like my 4th kid at this point. Like the school is that for me. And we just knew there were things that we wanted. We wanted excellence in academics, but we wanted excellence in ministry, in spiritual things as well. And honestly, for us, that comes first. Like in our handbook, when you read it, and that's always been what we have promoted to our young people, is like, you're going to learn how to read and write when you come out of here. And we hope that you learn how to do that in the best way possible. But before that, you're going to learn how to be connected with God. You're going to learn how to get plugged into a ministry. We are raising the future church. We're helping to. I shouldn't say we are raising, each parent is, but that's our thing. We are a partnership school. That's our tagline. We are partnering with parents to help them get an academic foundation, but also partnering with them to build a biblical founded apostolic student. And so that was just huge to us. Like when we said, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. And we're going to do it under the guise that this is first and foremost, we are raising tomorrow's church. We are helping to implement tomorrow's church. And wow, what a weight that can be, to pick up that. In education, I teach at the college as well, at our community college that's here. And education, it can be extremely humanistic. And so we have worked very hard to prepare our students to do and be whatever they want to be. North Little Rock does an amazing job at this too. I'm so thankful for great examples that we can look to and to make sure, if we're getting off course. Brother Pomeroy has been a tremendous help. And for me and my husband, the Pomeroys are amazing people. And so are the Holmes. They are so amazing. But, we didn't start it. Sister Varnum, our school started out of necessity. Her and Brother Varnum, our bishop, and them now, they just knew they had students that were in public school coming home and telling them the most horrific stories of things that were going on in those schools. And they just knew we have to do something. And they did. And that's the way they are. They're just like go-getters, And Pastor and Sister Holly have just picked that up. And they believe 100% in our school. And so, we had that to know we're going to continue this. and we're gonna build on what this wonderful foundation that they had already started. But they just said, we've got to have one. They need an apostolic covering. We need an apostolic school for apostolic children. And so we thankfully, we're able to kind of buy into that and be a part of that.
I am a huge proponent for apostolic education because I was that kid. Like I said, I was raised in church. I was always here. My dad backslid. My home life completely drastically changed to what felt like to a 13, 14-year-old girl overnight. And the only thing that stayed steady was I was going to Calvary Academy every single day. My teacher stayed steady, and when I was able to do things that I shouldn't have been doing and I would go to school, that's where I would get in trouble, and that's where I would be redirected, and that's where I would be told, like, "No, you're not gonna do this. You're gonna act you're gonna act this way. We're gonna hold you to this standard." And now as an adult, I'm like, I cannot imagine my life and where I would be without Calvary Academy and without those teachers and without them caring enough about my soul.
Yes.
What I learned in our, principal or our sister Alice's English class will never be replaced. But also I learned to pray, I learned to touch God, and I was covered by being there. So I think it's so important. I love seeing what you guys are doing and building there and talking about building things that is a legacy, for the next generation. So talk a little bit about that. What legacy are you hoping to leave for the next generation through your work and through parenting?
So I think probably the best way to sum that up, and I feel like we're doing that in our home, and then we're doing that and reinforcing that at the school. But we are building the next generation of apostolics every day, whether that's in our home or that's in the school. It really is both. So not only those 3 times that we go to church each week, but strong families build strong churches. And the Lord has convicted me about that over the last 2 decades, many, many times. He will bring to my remembrance when I'm, laying on my face and crying and asking God on those hard days, why, why does it have to be so hard? Whether that's as a parent, whether that's as an administrator to school and things you're dealing with and things you're seeing other families go through. And God constantly reminds me that strong families build strong churches. And for us at school and at home, every day is about those everyday spiritual experiences. And so just like you said, you're going to remember those English lessons. And I say that I teach English at our school. And I'm like, okay, great if you remember the parts of speech. Great if you remember how to put together an essay. But what I really want them to take away is those consistent habits that you talked about, those everyday spiritual experiences that kept them on. I'm sure that those same teachers would pull you to the side once in a while or address you guys as a class. I just did this the other day. I was talking to my English class and I said, okay, we're done with grammar for the day. We're done with this for the day. But what I want to address right now is I'm seeing some attitudes. And you know what that tells me? It tells me that not everybody here is praying through every day. That may seem, judgmental. It's not judgmental. I'm looking with a critical eye at tomorrow's apostolic church, my apostolic church, the church that's going to move forward with my children, the church that's going to help my grandchildren that are coming, that kind of thing. And so I think that we always have to come back to and remember that we are building every day. Our job as parents, our job as teachers in Christian education is we are building the next generation of apostolics. And I want them to be successful. We've got a harvest that God's coming back any day. God is coming back so soon. And we need their help in the harvest field. We need to be successful. And God is intending for them. They are the generation that will probably see the coming of the Lord. And so I want to prepare them in every way. My children, the children at the school, I want to prepare them every day with everyday spiritual experiences to be what they need to be in the kingdom for God in these last days. I want them to be everything they can be in this wonderful, wonderful kingdom that we're working through together.
So many things that you have said today has challenged me as a mom, like different ways to look at things and to see, and really mainly just challenged me to realize it's important. What we're doing is the most important work, and to not do it relaxed, to not do it lackadaisical, to not let up, but to realize it's important, and our children's souls are important. And I love everything that you have shared and said to us today. I know that, like I said, you've challenged me. I know you've challenged so many. Thank you so much for being on the podcast
Oh,
today.
it's
As
been amazing. Thank you for the opportunity.
so thankful you've been on. One thing that we love to do with the Unashamedly You podcast before we close out is to ask, what is one last thing that you would want to leave with everyone in the Unashamedly You community today?
Uh, okay, so I guess if we could just boil this down to one thing, you almost stole it from me, Sister Jamie, but it would be parenting is hard, but there is no greater calling. There's no greater calling, and it is so worth it. And so join with one another in prayer. I'm going to be praying for you, Sister Jamie. Please pray for me. We pray for the Pomeroys. Please pray for the Curries, and not get weary in well doing, because parenting can be hard, but it is so rewarding, and it is absolutely the greatest calling.
It is. And you have reminded us all of that today. So thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing your heart with us. Honestly, I feel challenged and I feel excited as a mom that I've got a great work to do. So thank you for challenging us.
It's
And
been a lot of fun. I'm going to miss you.
it has been fun.
Better text me once in a while.
I will.
Let me know how things are going.
I definitely will. Thank you so much for being on. Honestly, everything you said was so good. Thank you so much for listening to another episode on the Unashamedly You podcast. Having you a part of this community means so much. And if this podcast has blessed or helped you in any way, then I would love if you would go and leave a review on Apple or Spotify. Tag us on Instagram, give us a shout out, and tell your friends. We love when someone lets us know that they're listening because a friend told them about our podcast. Go be unashamedly you.